Keith, can we chat a little bit about succession? And I wonder, when did you start thinking about succession? And then maybe walk us through the journey. And I know recently you've passed the baton to Daniel Im, who's been on the podcast as well. And I think as we're recording, you're in your final week technically. So just talk us through the story.
Back in 2000, I did a 1-year sabbatical, and I went and did doctoral studies down in the States, which is very generous of my church to release me for a year. And when I was down there, I visited a church, one of the larger churches in America, where Bob Russell was the lead pastor. And Bob was talking about the fact that he was going to be stepping away and doing succession. And I thought, what? He's a thriving, healthy guy. That's one of the largest churches in America, and he's talking about making a change. And that got me thinking, as he talked about pastors have a beginning and an ending. And so I went away from there thinking, I wonder, how it begins to stir in your mind that I need to be thinking about endings. So that was where God introduced to me this idea of being intentional about endings. And so I was in open conversation with the board about would I serve, past 55, past 60. We do an annual review of how's it going, and do they feel I'm in, and do I feel I'm in, and we just had very transparent conversations. And as we talked and prayed, I had a growing sense that when the church was having its 100th anniversary this year, and I had my 30th anniversary, that would be a great time to start with a new leader of a new generation to build on the next 100 years. And I really felt at peace with the Lord on that was what God was leading me to. So 6 years ago, we began to talk about succession. First, from an emergency side, what happens if I get hit by the proverbial bus, or, the actuarials, unhealthy or something like that, what would the church do? But then on a more serious note, what would we do in an intentional way of passing the baton? And then about 3 or 4 years ago, we struck a committee and really began to move down that road and do intentional planning and strategizing. And what we ended up doing was, in our context, the board of elders are the ones who hire a lead pastor or select a lead pastor, discern that role. So I worked closely with them, and we began a process of discernment, and it's been an amazing journey.
And when did Dan come into the picture? Like, when did he become a candidate, and what's the journey between the two of you? Because you've had a season of both being on staff together, and I'd love just to know, because this is something happening more and more, what can you share from learnings from that journey together?
One of the things that we did as a board and as a church is we did a thorough evaluation and analysis of that 30-year story of the highs and the lows and the twists and turns. But we even went back beyond that then to the founding of what's the Beulah story and what's the DNA. And our board of elders really did some careful work about where have we been, who's God calling us to be, what do we see in the future? And we use an outside resource to help us with that, so we could really wrestle with what's God saying. Are we looking for vision 2.0 or just a tweak of the vision? Is it what is God calling us to? That was important groundwork and very transparent. We interviewed staff and other pastoral staff, and so we were open and transparent that we were doing this journey and doing the work. And then we began to delimit to the kind of candidate we were looking for. And one of the things was we said, is it possible to find, I call it the sons of the house, so somebody or a daughter, somebody who may know our ministry. And so we looked at some people who had been on our staff in past. And one of the things about a multi-staff church is we're Lord willing, developing leaders. And so looking and saying, does someone know our story and is connected to us? And that began us down that journey of the candidating route, looking at candidates. And out of that, Daniel had been with us for 5 years on our pastoral team, had gone down to work with Lifeway in Nashville, Tennessee for a few years, and was involved in doing national ministry. And providentially, I shoulder tapped Daniel and said, what would you think? Would you possibly come back to Edmonton? And he goes, this is crazy, because God had been stirring in his heart that, kind of like my story, that there's something more, there's something new. You're in a good place, but God's calling you to something else. And then we began to work and go down that journey. Our board of elders gave him a call to come as be my heir apparent as the successor, and then he joined our pastoral team. And I would also add that in our context, I invited our pastoral staff to be part of that. They've given their lives to be part of our ministry, so they were part of interviewing. They were part of the discussions, and I really think that was helpful for them as they're thinking and experiencing the lead they've worked with no longer being at the helm. It allowed Daniel, when he was called and came, to begin to work with the staff, begin to exercise leadership in programming and ministry, and as it turned out, into COVID, and really, how do you say it, begin to establish himself with them and build a relationship with them, so that he would increase and I would decrease during these last 24 months.